welcome back to another episode of Stripped by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I am your host, Steph Sia, aka Kimchi on stage. I really need to change that because I just actually don't really know when I'm going to be on stage next, guys. If you have been listening for a while, you might know that I am no longer really getting booked, which is a challenge that I am facing as a spicy dancer. But in addition to that, I have really leveraged my online presence. So you can find me online under the alias Sia on camera, and I'm usually found on Sex Panther. You can find me on Streamate, and OnlyFans and other platforms as well. So that is me. I have been a sex worker for over a decade, starting off as a sugar baby many years ago when I was like completely clueless about this world and the work that is entailed with it. So I'm excited to share not only my experience, but people that I bring onto the show, their experience in the work in the adult industry, in the sex industry, but not only people that are front facing in the role, but also talking about, allies and what allyship looks like, talking about nonprofit organizations that really advocate for sex worker rights. I'm bringing on people behind the scenes. Sometimes I have brought on clients to get their perspective as well. So really just trying to contribute to a larger conversation and to paint the picture of like what transparency really looks like in terms of what sex work actually looks like for folks. Because I know for folks listening, yes, a lot of you are sex workers. I love that. Super great. But I know on the flip side, there are a lot of people that are not in the industry at all. They just find this fascinating or want to educate themselves, or that's what I want to tell myself in my head. But we also have a lot of people listening to the show too, because they're listening to it as a resource, because, you're trying to do your due diligence in terms of like wanting to prepare yourself before you jump with 2 feet in. And now that there are resources that are more accessible and not so kind of hush hush anymore, I think it's a really great you guys are doing that. So thank you for that. As you know, each week is a different topic. This week is a especially spicy one because I am in both worlds as both a stripper, as I mentioned, and also a pole instructor and very active in the pole hobbyist, pole sport, pole fitness community, however you want to talk about it. So we're going to be talking about pole studios in terms of inclusivity and how they promote inclusivity for sex workers at their studios, whether in the studio. We're also talking about in the towns that they are in as well. In particular for this episode, we're going to be talking about the challenges that come with being in more conservative towns or in cities, and the rurality that comes with that, and the challenges that come with that as well. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about that topic in just a couple minutes, because we've got to thank the wonderful Patreon subscribers, those who have been with me since day one and like beyond. Like I have only launched that Patreon since season 4. It's like midway through season 7 right now. Which is really great. Thank you so much, everyone that is on there in that lovely community. I just want to do a quick little shout out for those who are on the top tier. There's basically 3 tiers. A lot of you will get access to like bonus features, bonus episodes, kind of sneak peek on who's coming onto the show, full video access for all of the episodes, which isn't found anywhere publicly, and lots of other great goodies and lots of bonus stuff that is available there. So on that 3rd tier, we have so many people from around the world, which is really cool. So I'm just going to shout them out. We got Snoo from Germany. Hello. We've got Geyser and Eric Arajo. I still don't know where you're from, but that's okay. We've got Bia York from Seattle, Washington. We also have Dan from Red Door Products, also from Seattle, Washington. Technically, I think Tacoma area. We've got McKenna King from Ottawa in Canada. Dale Flood from Vancouver, BC, right? Like actually pretty close to where I am. Thank you so much for your support. Raina from Sweden, and we've got Ruby from Victoria, BC as well. So lots of really great people over there. And of course, more people on the lower tier as well. But that's okay because, and it doesn't matter what tier you're on, you're still getting lots of, as I mentioned, really great nuggets, really great information there. If you're interested, we have tiers starting as low as $4 a month, and you can check it out. It's patreon.com/thriftbycia. Your funds are going directly to hosting my website because that has a cost to it, and also to help fund whenever I go out of town for adult industry events, which I believe maybe after this episode is recording, it would have been XBiz LA, which I am hoping to be there for a couple days. So I can't wait to see some of you guys there. Or thank you for hanging out with me. I don't know. I can't remember when this is coming out, and I don't want to check my phone right now, but stuff like that. So go check it out. It's patreon.com/strippedbycia. Anyways, I don't want to take any more of our guest time because she is patiently waiting here in the hangar. We've got Carol-Anne Kreiser joining us today, who is the founder and owner of Fly Fitness Aerial Studio in Kamloops, British Columbia, Canada. I am so excited to have her on today because, as I mentioned, we're talking about a lot of challenges that are going on, and this ongoing rift between sex workers, like mainly strippers, and pole studio people, pole hobbyists, pole sport people, pole fitness. There's like so many different names that it goes underneath of, but we're going to try to hash it out all today and just really hopefully get into a really productive conversation and discussion. So please welcome to the show. I'm going to call her Caro on this episode because that's what she usually goes by, but please welcome Caro on the show. Hi, Caro.
Hey, Steph, how are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited that you're here, and thank you so much for reaching out and initiating this conversation, which already demonstrates to me that you are wanting to hopefully make some change with how things are done and how things are perceived. So
I do. I think it's a conversation that is worth having. I am really passionate about it. I own a pole studio, of course, so I want to talk about it. And I'm really excited to hear your take about it. I know you've put out questions out there and people were able to participate. So I'm very curious to see what everybody had to say and if I can answer questions and maybe educate myself a little more.
yes, yeah, I'm so excited to have you on and just share your perspective as a business owner. And you've had some time in the industry as well yourself, and not only are you a pole studio owner, but you're also a judge for various pole competitions like PSO, CPAC, and other national competitions based here in Canada. But I would love to have the audience hear a bit more in depth about yourself. I mean, I would love for you to kind of give yourself your own introduction, and then maybe we can kind of trickle down in terms of like how you got started in the pole industry.
Sure. So, firstly, I want to say that I'm not a sex worker and I've never been a sex worker. So, my perspective today is really about allyship and what I can do and what my studio can do for sex workers, as I fell in love with the sport and the dance that is um, comes from stripping. And I want to make sure that I acknowledge that. Yeah, so if I do kind of a quick backstory how I got started with pole for today, I'll say pole fitness, and we can touch on why I use fitness and not dancing. I started with pole fitness about 5 years ago when I moved to Vancouver. So I'm from Quebec. I'm from a very conservative family with a very conservative background. And then I moved to Vancouver to be with my husband. And then his family is way more open about everything. And then I fell pregnant, and then my doctor wanted me to move a lot more my body during pregnancy. And I live close to a pole studio, and I decided to try it out, completely fell in love with it. And then I kind of never looked back and kept on going. And then slowly I've noticed by going to pole studio that some of my conservative background kind of really was challenged, and some of the thoughts I had and stereotypes I had weren't valid and really weren't based off of anything except kind of just hearsay and kind of what the media portrays. So I really felt as an individual I was way more inclusive and way more welcoming of people. um, a lot of times when you go to your local pole studio, you'll meet a lot of people and then you kind of pull with the same people a lot of the times. And then
Yes.
hearing them chit chat, I was like, um, why are you guys facing these challenges? Like, that's not right. And then kind of slowly getting that education in and then really giving me empathy. I was like, this is crazy that you're facing all of this for what? Like, just kind of made no sense to me. And I think that's where it really all started for me into why I kind of want to put my dollar where my mouth is as a small business owner and really tackle these issues. So that's kind of how it got started. And then during COVID, I moved to Kamloops to follow my husband for his work. There was no year-round pole studio here, and it's a very conservative town. I know we'll touch on that a little later on.
Yes.
And then I was a stay-at-home mom. I'm doing my master's in business, and I was like, you know what? Listen, it's something to read all about it and do all the books and the exams and stuff, but let me try to make this happen so I can have a place to pull year round, but also so my community here can feel what it is that I fell in love with the sport. And yeah, so that's how it started. And now I have my little studio, and we've been open a little over a year, and it's doing really well.
That's awesome. What a great story too. And like, just having and witnessing these observations, overhearing these things, and it really made you challenge your own biases and your judgments. And, whether this stems from family, whether this stems from the media and stuff, a lot of it is a kind of a mix of everything, right? I'm really glad that you were able to kind of face those judgments kind of head first and be a critical thinker and really think about, whoa, what's going on here, and like why is this the way it is, and stuff, which we'll get more into as well. But that's such a great story, and I love to hear that. Like everyone I know like falls in love with pole, and like being an instructor myself, like being able to see the just the hard work that goes into, like, say, like my beginner students, and just how excited they are to be there. It really helps fuel like why I continue to do this. And of course, I have other reasons as well, which we'll go into the show later in the show as well. But going back to your studio, Fly Fitness Aerial Studio. Um, so you're able to open this up. It's been just over a year since you've had it. Um, and you've opened it in Kamloops, where you're based out of. Tell me, or talk to me about, first of all, what it's like living in Kamloops. Because I've visited many times. I've been going to Kamloops since I was a kid, because I've had like wrestling meets and like, my friends that live out there as well. And it's just a beautiful place to be in, like a nice like wine region as well up there too. But tell us, what the realities of living in Kamloops is beside all the nice things.
All right.
Let's jump right into it.
um, I do love living in Kamloops, and it is my home now, and I've made roots here, and I don't want to this conversation make it feel like you shouldn't come to Kamloops. I'm saying come, and then be prepared to have to change a couple of minds, and that's all right too, right? So, it's more conservative to say the least.
Hmm.
When I decided to open the pole studio, you have to go through a long process to open a business, and you have to submit business plans, and you have to acquire business license and stuff like that, which are all reviewed by the city and the city committees. And the board in my city is very conservative. We don't even have an actual strip club in Kamloops. We used to have one, it shut down, and then the city voted to not be able to get those entertainment license anymore because they
Gotcha.
said, to quote them, "We will never have strippers again here." So that's
Oh
kind of
my
the
gosh.
mentality going into that. So I knew it was going to be a struggle. Um, I also did not want to kind of hide what I was doing. I was like, no, we are going to poll. This is what I do. We're not a strip club. So that was kind of the avenue I was able to go in. I had to submit videos of myself polling to explain what a poll class would be like, what we stand for, and all of that. So we slowly got to the city and were able to get the permits. And I say we, my husband and I, like he's a super big supporter in everything I do. And then finding a location was a big challenge as well. A lot of commercial building are owned by people that have more money, that are a little older. I
Yes.
don't want to say white men, but in my town, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then in a lot of location I even seen, they didn't even let me make an offer to lease. They were just like, no strippers here. Like no conversation to be had. One, I don't know why you're hating on strippers so much.
Right?
And then two, you're not even letting me explain. And then three, if I'm able to pay your rent, really, what does it matter? If I'm not making, like, I'm not punching holes in the wall and I'm taking care, pardon, of this place. So that was kind of an interesting. I can also
Mm.
touch kind of quickly on how we've been working on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love
Um,
to hear that. I really love to hear that.
Okay, so what kind of started as well, we got invited. There's going to be a new center for the performing arts, and we got invited to perform and kind of showcase what pole is, and got really excited. Some of our students and instructor decided to put a little thing together, and we were touching on different things, right? Pole fitness, pole dance. What can you expect when you come here? And then the city kind of got a hold of the plans, and then they were like, we said no strippers. They are not allowed to come to the event. So then we got canceled.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then we
Wow.
could have gone kind of two direction. I feel some of us in the studio felt strongly about just going on the public area with our poles, their stage poles, so you can bring them to the parks and stuff like that, and then perform, even if they didn't want to. But at the end of the day, I decided to go with the other route, which is I now sit on a bunch of committees for the city. And
Good.
yes, and then I'm
Smart.
like, let me educate people. Let me let more people know that we exist, what we do, what we stand for. And my hope is with the years and as the word gets out there, it gets a little less taboo. And then
Mhm.
minds can be opened a little bit.
That's a really interesting, great route to go to because I feel like most people would go like the grassroots route, which is probably is like route number one. Like we'll just go there anyways. We're not stripping, but again, like they have this label, they have this perspective already. It's like tunnel vision for these people. They're like, no, this is the only thing. Like a pole equals strippers, which is clearly not the case. But I mean, where did you get the idea to go the other route and like go sit on the committees and promote allyship that way and education that way?
I think a lot of it goes with temperament.
Hmm.
I don't like being told no, but I'm also like, how can I make this? Because if, like, I sat on it for a couple of days, right? And I was like, if we just go to the park and do it, then I feel we're giving these people ammunition. Oh, see, we said no and they just decided to show up. These people just listen to nothing, right? Like, that's the language that's used right now. And I was like, how can we change this? And I feel education is usually the route to a lot of these misconceptions. And I was like, how can I do that? And I was like, you know what? A lot of these people don't know us, they don't know what we stand for. And I'm like, how do we take the hate they have for strippers away? Well, by them having to face it face on, by them having to understand what their actions are actually doing for a marginalized group.
Hmm.
And I think the long game usually wins. And
Yeah.
getting people with honey usually gets them way more receptive than
Hmm.
kind of really not trying to, but making them angry or
Yeah.
going too much against the grain. I'm in a very conservative town. I'm a small studio. I don't have the push power to just full on take them on and like do this big manifestation. So I'm like, what daily actions can I do for it to get better, not only for me as a small business, but for the community I'm trying to represent as well?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's actually so big of you, Carol. I love to hear that too. And like, I'm loving that you're here for being in the long game, because a lot of this seems like policy work and like lawmaking, all the stuff takes so long and years for people to kind of change their mind on things too. So I think that's a really admirable route to take, and for you to kind of like go towards like the root cause and trying to dismantle folks' ways of thinking. So really huge. I'm excited to hear what other things are going to come out of that. And like, actually, maybe I'll just ask you now, like, like, have you been to any of the meetings thus far? And like, what has the general response been like, or is it still kind of icy?
I have gone to a lot of meetings. They because it's volunteer work, so I'm not getting paid to be on these committees. So they do
Mhm.
have trouble filling these committees. I am pretty young to be sitting on these committees, so I feel
Yes.
they're pretty grateful for somebody who brings a new perspective, right? And a lot of what we do is kind of boring stuff, right? We vote on budgets and we talk about things. I sit on a committee that looks at business plan for new businesses applying for the city. So I love that maybe business plans that are a little less conservative, then I really get to be like, okay, but hold on, why would we pass on this? Like it would bring like a new activity to town or a new mindset. It gets young entrepreneurs in the door, it's income generating for the city. So I get to really advocate for trying to change a little bit the conservative route.
Love that.
Um, we were able to get the business association to come to the studio. I was like, listen, how
Yay.
about I just host an event and all of you guys can come in and we can have little poll demos, talk about it, see what the studio's like, right? There's a lot of misconception if you've never been to a full studio about like, oh, what actually goes on in there? What does it even look like? And then, yeah, so we had a nice business mixer. I felt not as many people turned out as when other businesses do them, but we have to start somewhere, right? And the turnout was still pretty good. We got the mayor to come down and have a look and have those conversation about what we do and what we stand for. And I think the more we go that route, the more people know us. And then a lot of people are like, oh my God, this is like really fun. And my wife would love this, or, kind of these things. And then, yeah, I hope that in the long run, it really does play out and that more people from these communities that need to be represented volunteer for this. This is how we change it in the long run. This is how laws and bylaws and regulation gets put in place to support you in your community and
Hmm.
support what we stand for and support all of us that we're trying to move forward. So I really do hope that, yeah, more people go that.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. I'm hoping, and I'll have to like touch base with you too, and like how that is going to be, continuing on, and hopefully making for more productive and more inclusive spaces. And I guess like speaking of spaces, there's a couple questions that I have here too in terms of like, so I know this because of where you're located, because Kamloops is very conservative. I'm sure there's like a fine dance in terms of like, they hate strippers. They've made their perspective very clear, but then having to kind of dance around that fact and try to draw people in, and for them to see like, this is not, we are not strippers, and having that stance, like how do you balance the two, because it's so hard when you're dealing with the business aspect of things but wanting to also be inclusive.
Yes, it is a very fine line to walk on. I also try to not go out there and be like, we're not strippers. Because then I feel
Hmm.
like that pushes the speech that like stripping is not okay and
Hmm.
trying to build a big rift between us and strippers, which I feel is really not okay. Because I get to do a sport that I love that's built on the shoulders of strippers. So then me
Yes.
trying to unvalue, if I can use that word, stripping
Hmm.
and like what it does for the sport. Um, I use pole fitness when I do a lot of business meeting.
Gotcha.
One, because I am not a stripper, so I don't really pole dance, and I feel like me appropriating that wouldn't be all right.
Mm-hmm.
I feel for what I actually teach in the studio, because I'm also an instructor, right? I don't teach pole dance. I've never stripped, so I don't teach it. Um, so for me, it would feel icky trying
Mm-hmm.
to kind of appropriate that. But we do have strippers. I do hire strippers to teach those classes. Some of them use pole dance, some of them use pole fitness, and that is up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm sorry. I got lost in that question actually.
No, that's it's a big question, and it's like really tricky too in terms of like the fine line between, you know, trying to appease uh, businesses, like the business professionals, the city, all that kind of stuff, but then also trying to satisfy those who are strippers and the sex work community, and trying to embrace this language of like, okay, we are inclusive of strippers, we are inclusive of sex workers, but not like engaging in that language and stuff. But I think you actually answered the question pretty well. So
I
yeah.
will also touch up on the fact that how I represent the studio when I'm in business meeting, not that it's totally different, but yeah, I will really emphasize like we're a business with
Yes.
support and we employ people that support the community. Those dollars go back to the community. But then
Mm.
for students that come to the studio, it's a lot easier for us to have those conversations. I feel if you've come to the studio, one, a lot of the people I see that comes to the studio are willing to be educated, are willing to have that conversation. So it's way easier for me in the studio to be like, hey, by the way, like today we're working on this and this and this sport originates from the clubs and stripping. And I feel like students are way more receptive of that than sitting on a committee and trying to have that conversation because most of the people on the committee will never poll, so they really don't have an interest.
Yes.
So you also have to remember that you can only educate and have those conversations with people that want to be educated and want to have those
Yes.
conversations, right? So that's
Yeah.
usually how we go. So if you are a student at the studio, usually a lot of more of choreo class are also like I will full on tell it like, hey, today for choreo, I got inspiration for videos that you can see of the clubs back in the 80s, and this would be
Hmm.
more like the OG style, and this is kind of a lot of where the flow of pole has come from, and that's what
Hmm.
we're kind of tapping into. Like I mentioned, I do employ sex workers, and then some of them will be like, oh, I actually performed this the other day, like here's what's going on and things. So it's fun for student to be able to kind of tap in that, and then I feel like a lot of misconception at the same time for our
Hmm.
students get pushed to the side, and then it's easier for us to have those conversations.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like honestly, with any kind of business, like there's going to be some kind of pivoting. Like for example, if I'm talking to my grandma, I might speak to her with like a slightly like different kind of like language, or if I'm like I work at a hotel part-time, so like when I'm speaking to my guests, I will be speaking to them in a more formal way versus if I'm speaking with my friends and hanging out with friends. I feel it's a similar kind of similar kind of motivation for each, and you have specific roles as to why and when you will engage in a different kind of like terminology in a different kind of way, which to me makes total sense. Um, Kind of bringing us into your studio, into Fly Fitness Aerial Studio, talking about like what is the vibe like? How do you create culture there? How do you create an anti-homophobia environment? All that stuff. You were already mentioning a little bit, so I just really want to like jump both feet into that conversation.
Sure. So for people listening that have never been to a pole studio, this is not necessarily only for my studio. I travel a lot and I go to a lot of studios. A lot of the studios, actually, you will find that the vibe, the environment is amazing, super supportive. And I want to tell this to people too, right? A lot of pole studio or small business, if you put your money in businesses that you feel supports you and supports what you stand for, that goes a long way. In my studio, I made a conscious decision to hire strippers, right? Because then, like I mentioned, like I'm not a stripper, so I can chat about challenges that I know some of my stripper friends are going through. But hearing it from people that actually go through it, I feel there's more empathy with that. And then I feel like my instructors that are strippers are amazing, and their feedback and how they go about it, and our students adore them. So then they're like, "Oh my god," right? And then we got invited to go and see them perform and support them, and that was really exciting. We also foster an environment that does not support whorephobia comments. Um,
Thank God.
when you come to the studio, we make you sign a liability waiver and all of that, and that is also written into that, right? We support people here, and that's not only for sex workers, that's for anybody, right? People of color, BIPOC people, or the LGBTQ community. We are an inclusive community, and we will therefore uphold these standards for all of our students. So if you come here, we expect you to support this community and be an ally to this community, which I feel really does set the tone from day one into the behavior we are expecting out of our students, and also
Right.
the language we accept to hear in the studio. Um, yeah, also just kind of supporting organizations that are sex worker friendlies and do allyship with them. I donate to sex worker associations to be able to get more education out there for those associations to be able to continue on educating people. Sorry. Um, yeah, so that's what I can kind of do as a small business, and that's what we do at the studio. I'm a little older to be polling, like I'm 30, which doesn't is young, but in the poll community, it still pushing it a little bit. I have to say that a lot of our students are university students.
Yeah.
And wow, do I feel like a lot of them actually educate me. They're really open-minded, and then they're like, "Oh, Carol, like we could do this and we could change that." And then it's being receptive to the feedback that I think is super
hmm
important. And
Yeah.
I'm really pleasantly surprised at how open-minded I feel a lot of the people that come to the studio are.
I love to hear that. You're demonstrating like a lot of different ways that you can be inclusive
Mhm,
as studio owner, as an ally, which I think is really, really great. I mean, hiring strippers as instructors is like bare minimum. I feel
mhm.
like I have to say that unfortunately some studios will hire the one stripper and it would just be on the brink of like tokenism at that point. It's like, oh well, we hire sex workers, we employ sex workers, and there's like the one person that's on the team. I am one out of two sex workers, well maybe two and a half. Two and a half. Yeah, I was like, I'm not sure that person, the other person on my team has not had a an experience like this person was stripping for a queer community, which I think is really great, but that's like also like the best possible circumstances, like you're not dealing with like cis men on the brink of like sexually assaulting you on shift and stuff like that, like it's a different experience. But I feel like some studios have this thing where like, well, we've hired one, and they just think that's enough. It's really just not enough at all. So I love that you're having multiple steps that are abundant here at your studio, especially with the language thing. Like I think that's so important. I stop people in their tracks when they say weird things. But I'd love to
A lot of
hear your.
issues
Mhm.
is communicated with language we let kind of slip, and
Mhm.
then it slowly builds up, right? And that does build up the vibe. So I want to make sure that language used is appropriate. I was also going to touch on the fact that, mind you, I don't hire 20 strippers. I'm a small studio in a small town,
Yeah.
so I can only hire people that want to teach, right?
Totally.
But for studios and what I've been doing, like our next two guest instructors are also sex workers. right? They have a big platform. And that's another way for studios that maybe, I'm not even sure if I can say have access to strippers as
Mhm.
teachers, or that maybe is not a possibility. Like I don't have a strip
Yeah,
club in my town anymore.
right.
So I was just lucky enough that there used to be one, and those people are still performing out of other cities. And then I was like, hey, do you want to come and train here? And right. And that kind of conversation happened. But if you don't have access to strippers, for lack of better formulation, I guess,
Mhm.
yeah, as a pole owner, you can have guest instructors that are amazing and usually
Yes.
um, are a world of knowledge. And it's a great way for you to support um, people that are making the sport possible. And then it's a great way for your student to kind of get the education in. And usually, guest instructors are not shy to talk about issues, right? They travel, that's what they do for a living. Um, and then, yeah, just myself as the small business, kind of hiring those guest instructors keeps on pushing that boundary of like, let's educate ourselves, let's learn from people that do this for a living. And
Mhm.
yeah, I just find that really a great way for maybe smaller studios, even for big
Mhm.
studio, just like support your strippers.
Yes, thank you so much. There are so many strippers in my city where I'm from. Everyone knows I'm from Vancouver. And I know, like, I've spoken with them. Some of them have been students in my classes and they want to be able to teach. Are they given the opportunity to teach? Not always. So, like, I'm just saying this and putting these feelers out there in case there's any studio owners that are listening to this, that there is interest. There's a lot of interest. A lot of people do want to share their skills with students as well. So I'd love to just, like, plant those seeds over there too. Another thing I want to bring up as well, just as a side tangent, but also still in terms of under the umbrella of inclusivity, is dealing with sensitive information. Because when you do have strippers or any type of sex workers coming into your studio, unfortunately not all of them are in a position to be out and about. And I know at our studio we're able to use, we allow people to use their aliases or their stage names, and not forcing people to use like their legal names, and having training your front reception staff to know that hey, this is a sensitive topic, this is sensitive information and personally, like, identifiable information too. So we also need to be kind of careful about that, and not feeling like that these sex workers are being coerced into sharing information that they don't really or cannot share, and understanding and having that education piece and understanding why this can be problematic for them. Um, I just wanted to, I had a note on that too, so I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that as well. But I know that
Hi, it's Carly David, founder of PS Group, marketing agency for sex workers by sex workers. We're here to give you the tools you need to stand out. From slick websites to next level marketing strategies, we want to turn your fans into loyal customers. Our fees are project based, no commissions, no percentages. We believe you should keep the rewards of your hard work. So if you're serious about taking your brand to the next level, visit us at sexworkmarketing.com. Say hello. We'd love to talk to you.
a fellow guest on this show who's also a fellow stripper, I will quote her. She also messaged me about this. She's like, if I need to out myself as a stripper to feel included, then your studio is not inclusive. So I think that is, a thing that perhaps might be an oversight with people, because a lot of people are thinking the education piece, talking about the roots of pole and hiring strippers, and thinking that the work ends there. But there is still more things that have that the pole studio and studio owners like need to do to really encapsulate what inclusivity as a whole really encapsulates.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not sure.
love to touch on that subject actually.
Yes, please.
So, and this is only for my studio, right? Once again, I can only speak from what I know.
For
And I'm
sure.
not sure how other studios would do it. And this is actually one of the pieces that I'm open for feedback on, because we have a process in place, but process can always be changed and made better, right? Right now, the liability waiver, what, right? What would stand in court is people signing with their legal names, or with my instructors, your contract for your wage and all that has to be signed with your legal name. I'm a single owner, so I'm the only one seeing those. And technically, really, like, you sign it and I really don't look at it a lot. And then in the studio, you can go by whatever name you like. Our instructors, some of them go by aliases, and then students just get to know them with that alias, right? And that is fine. We do not force people to use their legal name in the studio. Also, your pronouns and all of that, right? That's another conversation to have, but you can use whatever pronoun you want in the studio, and we will therefore use those to refer to you. And then, yeah, I guess the struggle I'm having is, I wish there was a way for me to require no legal name, but because you do need to sign legal pieces of paper,
Yes,
and
that's the
those
tricky part.
require your legal name, but how you identify and how, and your alias at the studio, right? If you come in the studio and from day one you're like, hey, my name is whatever you want it to be, then we will thereafter refer to you with that name. No one else but me will see the legal piece of paper. And then, to be honest, there's some people that I've always only known about their aliases, so I wouldn't even be able to match them with their legal names. But if down the line, for some odd reason, we ever have to go to court for anything, right? Then I'd be like, hey,
Hmm.
what's your legal name? So I can kind of look through these papers. Um, so that's how we are not now, pardon, because I do know that not everybody feels comfortable using their legal names. And we advocate a lot for our instructors and we post them and stuff like that. So we want to make sure that we are using names that they feel comfortable with, outside of the studio as well, right? So if they want us to only tag their um, alias names on Instagram, that's how we do it as well.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. And like honestly, I can't even confirm if that's like I'm sure they have to use their legal name first, but like what I see in the system is maybe a name that they might have chosen,
That
which
is how I
makes
see them in the system.
yes, that makes much more sense. So we're probably on the same lines as you as well. But like again, open to feedback, and I'd love to hear from what other poll studios are doing as well. Is there another process that we can amend or implement to protect the safety of sex workers with their with their identification, basically? So open to hear from you guys.
Yes, and then it is a process that I kind of put a little bit of thought in, because it's not only for sex workers either, right? Some people
Hmm.
that pull and do pull choreo don't feel comfortable sharing that online under their legal
Real
name,
name,
because
yes.
maybe they're part of a conservative family. We have a lot of international students, and they're like,
Hmm.
oh my God, if my parents see this, I am destitute. And they're like, can we just not use? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Create yourself a poll account that you enjoy under your name, and that's the only poll account we will ever tag. There's people that will work muggle jobs, as we call them, and
Yes.
maybe they fear for their employer seeing anything they
Yes.
do, and then we will also use whatever aliases. So it is open for anybody.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, right now in my case, there's no way for you to never sign your legal name, just because I do need that piece of paper to protect myself, right? I'm a small business.
Of
If anything
course.
happens, I'm responsible, and I want to make sure that, yeah, the process kind of makes sense for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's really great. If anyone has like a better way of doing things, like please comment on the episode. And when this episode comes out, we'd love to hear from you as well. And we'll post all the contact information in the show notes if you guys haven't clicked on that stuff already. Talking about like, balancing fitness and stripping within one space. This is a big topic. We've talked about this on the show before, like way back in like season, I want to say 3 or something like that. But how do we embrace this without causing the divide between strippers and like pole hobbyists or pole fitness folks. How do we do this? How do you do it at your studio, Carol?
Yeah. One, I feel like we have to give credit where credit is due. A lot of the students I work with come in with an open mind and come in sometimes with just better education than I even have about a lot of these topics. I don't make a divide in my classes, right? So classes are open for everybody, whether you come only to learn tricks and you will never touch a choreo class, that is up to you. We do though mention that pull even your tricks, a lot of these tricks were comes from strippers,
Mm,
were originated in the clubs.
clubs.
And
Yeah.
then yeah, it has evolved and now some of the tricks are from gymnasts and cheerleaders, right? But the sport will always originate from strippers. So even if you're just here and you're like, "Oh, I'm never going to do a choreo class." Great, but your sport still comes from stripping, and we acknowledge that in all our class. And then I am a big choreo pusher. I'm like, you will feel yourself in these class, give it a try.
Yes.
And then those are usually a lot of the classes that our instructors will teach, that I will teach, and I make sure that I acknowledge, let's, like I said earlier, oh, today, like I this is based off of, let's say, the 80s script clubs or stuff like that. And knock on wood, I feel right now I haven't really had any issue in the studio with students being like, strippers or anything like that. Maybe because the standards are put in place from the start.
Yeah.
I am an advocate for, let's not separate this. Let's make sure that is a one big melting pot and
Hmm.
that student get to see different side of pole and know where all of it comes from.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that idea of like everyone joining together and benefiting from each other because yes, like we cannot deny that pole fitness would not exist without the world of stripping of by black and brown bodies, right? Like this is where it started, and we cannot deny that. And honestly, the amount of strippers that I'm friends with, and I see them popping into my classes or into other studios to really work on their tricks, to have a space where they can perform, not perform, but like to perfect their tricks and also learn from folks that are also like never have stepped foot in a strip club. I think it is a really, I think it really goes both ways. Like give and take, you can learn from both communities. We can learn together, and I think we really need to embrace that because it's just so like spicy right now.
Yeah,
It's
I was also
disappointing.
gonna say, and I know it might bring us to one of the topics you wanted to touch on. We
Sure.
do outings as a studio. We're like, hey,
Yes.
let's go. And we don't have a strip club, but there
Mhm.
is a bar in town that does amateur night where they do have a house dancer that night.
Mm.
And then it's nice for us to be like, hey, we're gonna go and encourage our instructor because
Love
usually
that.
they're the house dancers, and we're like, hey, we're going to go and support anybody from the studio who wants to join, come on in. And it's a great way for students to kind of get, yeah, get that exposure. And it's super supportive, it's fun. And then they go back to the studio and they're like, oh my god, we went out, it was so fun, like, right, I got to see like the instructor performing and do her
Hmm.
thing. And then that kind of trickles down to other people. They're like, oh, you did go out, oh, okay, oh, maybe next time I actually join, right?
I
And that's
love
a
that.
really nice way, and it's a nice way to support our people as well, right?
Of
Let's go and
course.
once again put our money where our mouth are. Let's go tip, let's go to the club, let's go support.
I love that. And like it's a good opportunity to like educate them on like strip club etiquette or any kind of club etiquette. Tipping per show. If you're sitting in the front row, then you're gonna also be tipping, for every song that comes on and stuff, or sit in the back if you can't afford it and stuff like that. I think it's really great to show like the different movements because like, some people when they have performances, so different than like a showcase versus competition versus working in the nightclub, a strip club environment. They're all very different veins, you know? So I think it's a really great exposure and sounds like a fun field trip. Like I would love to join
It is. And then, yeah, we
that.
get to touch on kind of strip club etiquette, right?
Yes.
One, the stripper who's on stage will be here for hours. Uh,
Hmm.
let's lower the expectations of really hard tricks that we get to practice at the studio with a spot and a crash mat with perfect poles, the environment where like everything goes right for you, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, let's lower that. This
Yeah.
person is doing her job. She's going to be here for like
Yes.
6, 7 hours. So one,
Yes.
let's note that. And I tell students that, right? Because I feel a lot of people kind of go there and they're expecting just the
Oh my
hardest trick and
gosh.
flips all the time. I'm like, let's dial it
Let's
back a
bring
little
it
bit.
down. Yeah.
Two, this is this person's livelihood and her work. How about we do never go on stage to just do randomness and kind of discredit what she's doing, right? I'm like, how about we don't do that? And then, yeah, if you are in the front row, you are expected to tip. How about we also acknowledge that? And you're not taking this whole row because it's a little school trip. And then you've just kind of taken away so much money, right? Like,
Hmm.
you want to tip? Let's go. But we are expected to tip if we are sitting here, right?
Absolutely.
Those little kind of things I feel for pole fitness people, if I can say that.
Hmm.
Yeah, you have to acknowledge that. Some people just know, but some people have
Yeah.
to be told. And that's
Yes.
why I feel like those little field trip are a great way because then these people now know about club etiquette and what is kind of required and what you should think about when going.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely talk about this very, very soon once we jump into Q&A because there's just so much, so much stuff that's come in. To add to your points, Carol, yeah, and people are like, it's going to be tricks, 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 tricks. Like when you're working, I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, like, you know, I have to do like a 20-minute set, 18 to
Mhm.
20-minute set. Do you think I'm going to be doing tricks the entire time for like 4 or 5 minute songs in a row? Like, no, like sometimes like when I see my students coming in, which I love, I think it's really great that like for the support, I feel like, oh my gosh, I need to like do something crazy because like they're expecting that, which I love to do and which I will bust out here and there. But it in reality, and this also goes for amateur nights, like not everyone is there for the tricks, and most of the time those tricks are not going to get you paid. It's more like let's twerk, let's like show a little booty, and like, you know, really crowd interaction that took me so long to understand that, oh, that is the recipe for success. When I was a baby stripper, I was like, oh, because I came, for those who like might be confused, I came from pole first before going into the strip club. And some people have thoughts about that, but you have to start somewhere. So that is where I'm with that. And also, there's another point too. When you are in the crowd, we love cheering, but you also don't want to be that woo woo girl. We always call them woo woo girls, where it's just screaming and yes, girl. And there's like no money materializing and like on the stage. The cheers are really encouraging and great. But we don't get paid with woo woos. We get paid with dollars and actual real money. So I just want to put that out there too. Again, like cheering and that kind of support is great, but like money is what gets us paid at the end of the day. It's our job.
And you know what? Something that we do say is when we do go out there to support, we have the opportunity to kind of trick the show for this person, right? Let's go on there and start tipping because then it really puts the other people sitting there and be like, oh my God, everybody's tipping. Maybe I have to tip too, right? And
Yes.
like you get to set the tone and help this person out, help her out. Let's do it. Because exactly, just you being like, yay, woo woo, great, great. But
But
let's work with the stripper to make sure that she's having an amazing night. And we can help by setting the tone, by tipping, by sitting in the front row and really making it rain. Like if you can afford it, do it.
yeah, hells yeah. If you can afford it too, of course. That's another thing as well. It's another topic. But yes, only come to the club if you have money. um before we go into all of the questions and all of the comments, Kara, I just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. I just want to make sure that like you were able to say everything that you wanted to say. And I'm sure there's a lot of topics here with the questions that we'll also go into that we didn't discuss yet, but we'll be discussing in detail.
Hey, I can talk about pole year round, so I'm more than happy with the conversation we just had. And yeah, let's touch on those comments and maybe new subjects will pop up.
Yes, so we're going to go into some Q&A, and thank you all for contributing. I posted on Blue Sky, I posted on X, I posted very actively on Instagram because I know a lot of pollers are on Instagram. Thank you, and strippers obviously, but thank you so much for contributing to this conversation. I think this conversation is really overdue and we really need to talk about this. So I have lumped some of your questions together. All these questions are going to be anonymous, but they all came from real people, real strippers, real students as well. So we'll kind of go into it, and then there's a lot of comments that came in terms of feedback for pole studios that I'm hoping that you'd be open ears and would be interested in hearing, Carol.
Absolutely.
Let's go into that first question. So the first question is, what are good ways for pole hobbyists to perform if they feel they want to try performing?
All right. One, never in the club. You are not a stripper and you do not take their work from them. There's different options actually. At my studio, we do a showcase, which is held within my studio. So we don't rent a strip club because once again, we are not strippers and we are not trying to cosplay, if I can say that.
Oh my gosh, yes, we will be
So
talking about this.
we do it at our studio. And if you want to perform, that's as a student, that's a great way to start. There's a lot of pole competitions as well. If you want like a huge crowd, and then you can travel and you can compete. Um, Once again, I feel like I support more competitions that are at actual venues that are not at strip clubs. Because once again, we are not trying to cosplay. We are trying to acknowledge where this sport is from, but we're trying to make it in a way that makes sense for the community. Yeah, so I feel like showcase at your studio or competition would be great. If you are at a really small studio that don't have showcase, I know most competitions since COVID, you can perform your piece at your house, just video it and then submit it online for your competition piece. And that's a great way for anybody anywhere in the world to be able to perform.
I love that. I love that. Like, what we used to do, I like it's not in my classes, but like some of the classes that we have on like a Friday night, it's called like After Dark. We will do a choreo, and then we'll give the students the ability to, or the opportunity to kind of dance by themselves and give them like a minute to like highlight them. So sometimes we do that. I don't do them in my classes because there was like money involved or like fake money involved, and I like don't support that, and I just think it's weird. But I just allow them to like, okay, we'll just people can sit down, then everyone has like a chance to go up and kind of perform for the crowd, which I think is really, really cool. So that's another way in addition to what you've just said here, Carol.
Yeah,
So
that's an amazing way too.
yeah, especially if you're a smaller studio and you don't have like the showcases are like a couple times a year, you don't want to wait till the next one. Could be an opportunity to perform there.
Absolutely.
um this one is a few questions in one, but they're all very similar. And we already kind of touched on it too, but if you want to summarize or add anything, we can definitely, of course, include that. But steps your pole studio has made to be supportive of the sex work community. And how do pole studios currently pay tribute or not to the roots of pole, whether subtly or openly?
All right. I have a lot of feelings on this one. One, for anybody listening, you have to also realize that I am a small business owner. So I can only support in ways that make sure that I stay in business because that's the only way I can keep on supporting, right? Um, for my own studio, and I can't talk on a bunch of studio, I can only talk for what I do. One, allowing people to use aliases. Two, I do give actual money, actual dollars to association and charities that support sex workers so that they can keep on doing what they do. When I travel as a student, I will only go to studios that I feel have the same inclusivity and the same standards as to what we feel is right to do by the people that have built the sport. Yeah, I employ strippers and pay them a living wage so that when they come and teach, it makes sense for them to do so. Yeah, I guess those are what I'm doing right now. We always also acknowledge where the sport comes from. We dance our choreo in pleaser shoes, as people call them. I like to call them stripper shoes. They are stripper
Yeah.
shoes. Let's
Yes,
call
they
them what
are.
they are.
Hmm.
Yeah, so for my small studio, that's what I do. I can't talk, and I think you want to bring maybe other studios up, but not naming names, but just kind of general. I think you have other experience than I do.
Yeah, yeah. So I have taught at the major studios here in the Lower Mainland, in Vancouver, both. Yeah, we're not going to name them, but you could do a quick Google search. Yeah, so what we do at our studios, actually, a lot of that is very similar to what you said. So I'm not going to repeat them, Carol, but like we do a lot of the same things, which I think is really great. Um, for my own personal classes as a stripper, I always mention that, especially because I teach a lot of heel based classes, lots of choreo classes, and it's not always about like strip like pole dancing comes from stripping. I always mix it up because I feel like some people, and the students that have been there for a long time know that already. But I'll be like, oh yeah, we used to do this, or I used to do this when I used to dance on stage a lot. This is a move that I originated because this is like a little bit more comfortable for me, or I just needed to take a break from from everything, and it allows me to take a break in front of my customers in the front row, but you can make it look pretty this way, or you can make it look like that. So those are kind of ways that I educate too. And it's pretty open. Like I am very open. I'm very direct. I'm very comfortable doing that because of my work as a stripper. And it has been received well, which is really great because I like any kind of opportunity to educate my students, because a lot of them, like your studio too, Caro, a lot of them are like university aged people. Any kind of comments that I find to be disruptive or inaccurate, I like to kind of shut that down and correct them, to be like, that is not okay. But not in the way of like shaming, but in terms of like an educational standpoint. Be like, oh, that's actually not like factually accurate. Like that doesn't actually really happen in the club, or that doesn't like that is just from movies and maybe from Hustlers or something like the movie and stuff like that. So those are just a few examples that I do in my personal classes in a studio setting. Which I think is great. And I can go on and on, but those are just small things. You guys will just have to take a class at some point.
Yes, if you are thinking about taking a pole class, do it. It is
Yeah.
so much fun,
So much
and it's
fun.
like, yeah, it's just an amazing. Well, I have to say that. I want to say an amazing way to move your body.
Absolutely. This is a big one. This is something that's really, really happening very often in the past like 6 to 7 months. Actually 8 months by the time this comes out, but lots of questions this. So sex workers' feelings on amateurs / hobby pullers taking space in nightclubs. What do we think about using strip clubs for showcases and competitions? Um Caro, do you want to start this one?
I will just say what I feel I've said before.
Mhm.
I don't. Um, but once again, I am only able to speak for myself. I feel that doing my showcase in a strip club would be kind of me cosplaying as a stripper and encouraging my student to cosplay as a stripper. I also only give money and support competition that are not in strip clubs unless they're exclusively made for sex workers. Then I'm like, okay, fine. That is my stance, but I would love to hear yours because I think you do have a couple of issues you want to bring up.
Yeah, so basically, Dance Filthy was held in a strip club here in May. I was asked to be a judge for this competition. I had asked for compensation. What is a compensation like? Assuming that there's compensation. I was met with there is no compensation. Plus, we had to do some paid training thing to be part of the Danceville franchise. And I was like, nope, you can pay for my training and you can pay for my labor. Especially because they had asked sex workers to be on the panel. Luckily, they came back and were happy to pay us, and they also paid for a training. So I'm glad I was able to speak up and advocate there. I had friends working at this particular club who were upset because not only was it a competition, but it was an amateur night right after that. And it took up an entire evening. I was there till past midnight. Um, and this is despite it being on a Sunday before the long weekend. I know that lots of my fellow dancer friends who were employed there or are employed there were upset about this because you're taking up more time from the featured dancers who are supposed to be on stage making money. Then you have all these outside people, which is great to fill the club in, but then when asked like, oh, like, why aren't you tipping, like, and stuff like that, like, they're like, oh, we're just here for this event hosted by blank. So it caused a big riff, and that was just the first thing with this whole thing about pole studios being in strip clubs. That was already like, okay, the can of worms has been open. And then I don't know the full parameters of this. I've spoken to many folks that are also a part of the studio, and now that I guess they had that event, they hosted that event, Dance Filthy there. Now it just made it somehow okay for pole studios to come in and host their showcases there. I don't know about that because, like, even my studio, they had their showcase at a different pole studio. But again, now are we just allowing for pole studios to infiltrate I, in these spaces? And the reasoning that we were given and the active steps that we were taking to not step on Dance's toes was to do this before the club officially opens, which is fine. I know that, like, with our event, donations were made to an organization which I sit on the board for, so that was really nice. And we said tipping will not be accepted. Like, our students are not going to be accepting any tips on stage. Any tips that are going to be on stage are going to be donated to the dancers that evening. And please stay, please sit down and stay for the remainder of the evening to tip the professionals that are working here. So that's great. But again, most of what I've heard about, and also what you shared, Caro, too, is about, it's the cosplaying as strippers and not carrying the weight of the stigma of strippers, and not having any risk associated with you dressing up and basically playing dress up for the evening. So those are a lot of what I have gathered from the folks, the dancer colleagues of mine that are upset with this. And is this becoming a new standard? Is this becoming the new norm for pole studios? I had asked my owner of our studio to be like, is this going to be happening again? They have said it's going to be happening again. So I'm not sure if they understand that, like, yes, you booking a strip club is great because the pole's already in place. Like, that's not a good enough reason. And also, like, they're like, oh, we should host it in a space that's, like, sex worker friendly and, like, that's, their place of work. Cool. But, like, none of that money, the venue rental, goes to the actual workers. Do
Yeah,
they
none of
know
that
this?
money trickles down to the actual stripper. And
Yes.
I guess this is maybe an actionable item. If you are a student and you are listening to this podcast right now and your studio does do this, maybe bring it up to the owner, bring it up to your instructors. Also, for fellow pole studio owners, maybe have those conversations with with some of your instructors that are strippers, with strippers from your community, right? I guess my answer would be it depends. It depends how the strippers where you live feel about it. And yeah, make sure that some of that money actually trickles down to them because, like you said, some of their time was taken away from them where they would actually be making money. And then also kind of, yeah, I don't know. I don't love it, but that's just my take, and that's all right if it's not everybody's take. Um, I would be like, talk to the sex workers that you work with. This is a conversation to be had with each studio, depending on what you do. If you don't do a showcase, then maybe it doesn't really concern you that much, right? But if you do go to a competition and you do register for a competition, maybe that have that thought process. Where is this competition being held? Is there anything on this website saying what they're doing to support the actual strippers that are in this club? And yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm in between. I don't do it for myself and for my studio. I understand, but do I necessarily agree with it? Probably not. So
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, like one more last thing too, because I was like, oh, like, maybe we haven't heard from the strippers and dancers, a few people that I do know have talked to these studio owners and higher up at the studios, and they were blatantly pushed to the side with their concerns. And they obviously cannot, like, the dancers cannot speak to management at the club because they don't care about the dancers there. They will get fired. They're going to lose their job. Literally, I had so many people private messaging me, and my inboxes were going crazy because they're like, I wanted to post on your thing. I cannot. So I'm going to tell you this anonymously because if management ever find out that I was expressing concern about this, I would be off the roster immediately and I wouldn't have a job. And that was many people, like a good handful of people that I know personally.
I feel that's really sad. And
It is really sad.
it's sad for this topic, but it's sad just in general if you are bringing up issues or challenges and you're not being addressed in a constructive manner and nothing is kind of being done, then I'm sorry for those people. I really am. I'm sorry you're going
Yeah.
through that if you're listening and that's you. Um,
Yeah. Sad.
Unfortunately, there's not a bunch, I would say, and I know this is not always possible, but if you are a student at one of those studios and you have the option to go somewhere else and
Mm-hmm.
go somewhere that actually care and actually will acknowledge your concerns, then that's a great way. Pole studios are pretty small businesses usually
Mm-hmm. Yes.
where you put your dollar matters. And in some towns, city, I know that maybe there's just one pole studio and then you don't even have that option. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess I don't really have a full on bulletproof solution. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
But we're having this conversation for a reason because, like, we want to be able to try to find a solution eventually. But like, hopefully, people listening will be like, "Oh, wow, I did not know any of this stuff was
yeah,
existing." Like, I had people come up to me and say, like, "I didn't know this was a thing. Like, this is like gentrifying stripping." I'm like, "Yes, it is. That's a really good way of putting it." Whoever wrote that on X, thank you so much for coining that term. Um, I just don't want this to be all negative, but I wanted to shift this part of the conversation because I basically put a post out saying how can pole studios become more inclusive, and we've had a lot of people contribute to this conversation. I kind of grouped those answers to cut together, so I feel like we'll just kind of go through this right now, Carol, and you feel free to stop me at any point, comment on anything, especially from a business standpoint. But yeah, I guess we'll kind of go into it because there's a lot here. So some people wrote allow thongs in practice, which I think is an easy thing to do.
I
If,
feel
mhm,
depending once again maybe on where you're located in the world.
mhm,
I'm in Kamloops, which for people that don't know is about just a couple hours from Vancouver. I have seen studio in Vancouver allow to dance in thongs.
yeah,
My rules are pretty loose as well. I'm like, as long as you're wearing a thong and pasties is kind of
you're
the
good to go.
minimum, I guess.
Yeah.
So everybody else feels comfortable. You feel
Yes.
comfortable. We feel comfortable. That's great. Um, Also, shout out to the studio in Kelowna, which I know allows for the same. Um,
Yay.
yeah, great,
Hells
great
yeah.
feedback actually, and I wish more studio did it.
Right? I'm the same way too. My butt's always out, so. This person wrote accept cash payments. So that can be another thing too.
Maybe if you're in a studio that doesn't allow cash, maybe ask the owner why, right? Maybe there is issues. Also, from a business standpoint, I'm very grateful I'm at the position where my bank is not looking for every penny. Like I am able to afford my rent and stuff like that. So not every single penny counts to be in the bank account, if I can say that like that. Maybe your owner needs this to be able to renew their lease, to be able to pay the instructors or things like that. Um, yeah, so I guess that would be maybe a case by case, but
Yeah, case by
come to
case for
fly with
sure.
cash.
Yeah, yeah. It's good. Obviously, like, with sex workers, we accept a lot of cash payments. But like I would say, like, after COVID, a lot of places, I like me just traveling around, like everything's like cashless payment. I'm like, oh my god, I have all this cash that I can't use. So I
Mhm.
hear you with that. This is something you already do. Strippers as instructors, which is great. General acknowledgement about sex work. This person did a voice note as saying, like, even a poster outlining sex work and the myths that come with it, as an educational piece in your studio could be a thing. Along that line, someone else, how like people were like, we support BLM, or like we're queer friendly, and having those stickers either in the studio physically or on the website. Perhaps maybe we could have like a sticker that also says like sex worker friendly, or something on a website that says sex worker friendly, so folks in the sex work community would know that this would be a safe place. I think a lot of people were like, I'm not sure if this is inclusive or not, so I feel like having more clear terminology or just signs or anything like that could be helpful for the community.
And see, I could use that. I Now that you're mentioning it, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I do actually. And that's such an easy switch.
Such an easy
So I'm
thing.
like, why not? Yeah, actually that's great because I know like when you come to the studio, we use the sentence sex work is work all the time. But we have like stickers and stuff like that. It'd be great to have that on stickers. It'd be great to have it on our website. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, easy
Great
thing. And yeah, really great. Thank you so much, whoever wrote that in. I know who you are, but I'm not going to say your name on air. Stop charging an arm and a leg to make it more accessible. This person also, another person wrote, like, having discounted rates for sex workers, or also having open studio for sex workers, whether that's discounted or not, or having an hour for sex workers. So yeah.
All right, I do have an opinion on this.
Sure. Yes.
Once again, depends on what studio you are and what the circumstances are. My clientele, like I mentioned earlier, students, money is tight.
Mm-hmm.
Pole is expensive. And from a
Yes.
business standpoint, pole is expensive because there's only so many poles in one class, right? Um, at my studio, we don't share a pole, meaning that if you book your class, you will be the only student on that pole. And I have 9 poles, meaning that there is 8 students per class. And I feel very strongly about paying my instructors a living wage. What they do matters, and I want the amount that I pay them to reflect that. So I can only charge what would cover my fees, right? My instructor, my rent, and kind of my website and stuff like that. And then, like I tell people in the studio, my goal is to never increase these memberships and never increase but to do so, I have to continuously be creative with ways to draw in income. Um, I give out a lot of free classes. We have an open studio door policy. If you can come and train if you are on any membership. If you're on the cheapest membership, you can come to an unlimited amount of open studios.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, to try to make it as affordable as possible. I am sorry if it is expensive. Like I said, there is a reason behind it between paying the instructor and paying the pools. And from me, when I open, knowing how much to do charge as a student that has traveled and pulled at multiple place, uh, I am probably the most affordable studio I've
Yes,
ever
I
seen.
was checking your prices. Definitely
Yes.
most affordable. I think on average it's like $35 a drop in at most places nowadays.
Yeah, the
So
most expensive way you can come to my class is $30. And when I see people booking that, I'm like, please don't. Listen, you can have
Yeah.
like a pass that is this. And if you're not in town for a while, we offer a 4 class that comes out to like $15 a class.
Amazing.
Yeah, like I am trying hard. I hope that other pole owners are listening in, and then that you can find other creative ways to bring in money. Also, kind of side note really quickly, I know the price of gear to pole is expensive. If you do want those stripper shoes, if you want multiple sports bra and outfits, at my studio, we do pole thrift market. That's a hard word for me to pronounce in English. I'm sorry. Where like I sell shoes that I'm not using anymore, where other students and instructors sells shoes, outfits, and stuff like that. So it is a little more affordable for some of our lower income students to be able to purchase these things. And I would love to see other pole studio do those. So just kind of food for thoughts for any fellow pole owner out there, even just instructors, students, if you are able to bring that up to your owner. Also be like mindful. I'm a small business. I run this like a business and I go to school for business. So there's a lot of things that I do that might not be natural. A lot of a lot of pole studio owners do it for the love of pole. This is their first
Mhm.
business, right? It is
Mhm.
expensive because they're kind of having losses here and there. Like I
Yes.
manage mine in a very efficient manner, and I'm very grateful for all the help I get with it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, pull is expensive, and I'm sorry
Well,
for
it's
that. And
expensive.
ask your owners what they could do. If you have ideas for them, like share them, right? Make your voice heard.
Yeah, I love that. I love everything you said there. And yes, pole is an expensive sport. It took me a long time. I wasn't able to afford it for the longest time until I was able to at 2016. So it's just like this is what's happening. But this goes with any other niche sport. This goes for any other niche kind of membership as well. It is expensive, so just know that. But I do like the efforts that you're making too. Like I know one of the studios I used to teach at used to have like a bin of pleasers that people just use for when they're there, or I don't even know if you can take them, but like yeah, we had that opportunity, and as well as like a clothing swap. I
Yep.
think a lot of people do clothing swaps too. Um, Sorry, there's so much more stuff here. Stop having non-strippers teach stripper classes. We were talking about hiring sex workers.
I
We
also
also,
want to put this caveat though on this one.
oh yeah.
I do hire strippers, but I also hire dance instructors. I am not going to say no to people just because they are not sex workers, but I
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that I am also hiring sex workers, right? I think both can be um, beneficial. How
Absolutely.
my dance teacher teaches is very different, and she doesn't claim to be a stripper. She doesn't claim, right? And I want to make sure that that is also acknowledged. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there is knowledge to be had from everybody. And once
Yes.
again, being inclusive will bring you so much further.
Yes.
And yeah, so that's my small caveat on that one.
No, I agree with you with that as well in terms of like you being a student, I was able to learn so much from different instructors and different styles that they teach, and even different methods in terms of like how they're teaching the move. Like something would resonate with me like with one instructor over another. So I think it's a really great exposure to have that as well. Yes, maybe in an ideal world, if you're just doing heel classes, maybe yeah, it's really great to hire strippers for those classes. But I think for stretch, for things that are off the pole, for conditioning and technique classes, I think it's actually really great to have a trained dancer
Girl,
in
also
that.
says a lot of the instructors that are also strippers are like, thank you that for once I can just come in and have somebody else tell me what to do and I can put my brain off and work on things that I'm trying to achieve for myself. So I
Yes,
think the mix of exactly what you said, having a little bit of everything, I think goes a long way.
absolutely. um yes, we did talk about cosplaying being a stripper without having any of the risk or stigma. We mentioned that earlier. We also mentioned educate on the history of pole, black and brown sex workers, teach respect, set an example. Similar line, literal acknowledgement of sex workers and about how they paved the way for pole fitness and where twerking came come from. come from. Sorry, like I think I wrote this weird. This person wrote, include an educational resource for every student about the history of this hobby. All students must sign a waiver, make it mandatory to read consent to becoming educated, to continually respect the roots of pole. Donating monthly to sex worker nonprofits for profiting off this art. We mentioned about discounts or free open studio for sex workers, limitations around that, of course. We also mentioned about language, calling out students about when they say some shit, even though it's minor. Poll students, check your biases about sex workers, become more conscious and are benefiting from sex work labor by practicing poll. And the last one, use your space in the downtime to host a fundraiser for your local street level sex worker shelters, collect donations for local orgs. So many great pieces here that I'm hoping studio owners or potential studio owners can really take into making a pole studio much better place to be and really truly be inclusive.
Absolutely. Those were all great. And I love that people felt so kind of touched on the subject and really wanted to put their voice to it. And once again, I know I'm a broken record, but please bring this up with your pole owners, with your instructors, right? Make your voice heard. That's how change happens. And if you don't feel like they're listening, try to see how other students feel about it. How are other, right? There is also power in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
We want to keep pushing forward and keep on bringing these issues up.
Yes. Please bring it up to your studio owners. People will tell me, but it's not up to me to tell the owner. You also have the agency to do that. The inboxes are open. So please, let your voice be heard if you're able to, especially as a student. I feel like you are more free in that way and you don't have any job things potentially being taken from you. So please speak up. But yeah, this was such an incredibly eye-opening episode and so great to just have this conversation with you, Carol. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
But before I let you go, where can we all find you and learn more about the studio?
So I am located in Kamloops. You can find us online at flyfitnessaerialstudio.ca. We are on Instagram. Give us a follow. I know a lot of people here listen from all over the world. Following us and liking our posts and all of that goes a long way for other people in my community to see it, for other people in the pole community to see it. Fly Fitness Aerial Studio on Instagram. And follow and like studios that align with your values. Put your money where your mouth is. Go to studio, spend the money on studios that align with what you believe in. And always have your voice heard.
Yeah. So great. And if you guys are looking for more homework to do as well, if you want to get in touch with me or if you didn't like something that we said in the show, please call me out on it. I would love to hear that. I would love to hear your opinion on this episode. I am found on Instagram, Stripped by Sia Podcast, on X and Blue Sky under Stripped by Sia. And if you are looking to get on the show, you can always reach out to me on my website, strippedbysia.com. And there's a contact form there you can fill out. I do read all of submissions that do come in and can work with you on developing an episode on a topic that you feel passionately about. But yeah, please pitch me because it's really helpful and it really shows me that you want to put some effort into putting some good quality episodes out in the air with me. So and last but not least, please rate and review the show. That would be super helpful in having others discover the show. And for folks that need resources, do share this with your sex worker friends or non-sex worker friends. And I think that's pretty much it. It's new episodes dropping every single Sunday, dropping at midnight Pacific Standard Time. And I hope to catch you all in for an episode next week. Thank you all for tuning in with me on this extra long episode. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Carol.
Thanks.
You're listening to Stripped by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Music by Ted D. graphic design by Maria Bellandarama, and photography by Ian Dabrin.